So welcome back, everybody. Now that you know about where the materials that are important for metabolism come from, namely the digestive system and the respiratory system, it's time to see how those materials are moved around the body in the circulatory system. So let's get started. So the goal of the circulatory system is to transport materials to and from the cells. And the circulatory system is powered by a pressure pump, which we call the heart. And in humans and all mammals, it is a closed system. And that means that the blood is entirely contained within blood vessels. In other words, the organs aren't bathed in blood. The blood occurs only in these tube-like blood vessels. The circulatory system branches as it travels away from the heart and ultimately leads to very small capillaries through which material exchange occurs. The materials cannot escape the blood through veins and arteries earlier. They can only escape and be transported to cells at the capillaries. The capillaries form a very fine network within tissues, and we refer to those networks as capillary beds or capillary networks. And most cells are adjacent to, or at least very close to, a capillary and therefore are served by it. Blood is then returned to the heart in increasingly large blood vessels, so you go from many small ones to a few large ones returning blood to the heart. It's worthwhile remembering the inputs and the outputs to the human body system. Materials come into the circulatory system from the small intestine and the lungs and are exported from the circulatory system through the lungs and the kidneys. And we'll talk about the urinary system a few videos from now. The implication here is that anytime there are exchange of materials, there must be a capillary system in each of these locations in order to exchange materials. We've already seen that with the small intestine and with the lungs. So here's a schematic diagram of the circulatory system. And what you can see is that blood flows away from the heart. In this case, it's red colored, and then it flows back to the heart, in which case it's blue colored, away from the heart and back. These net-like areas are the capillary networks. And if you look carefully, you can see that one side of the heart sends blood to the lungs, and the other side of the heart sends blood out to the rest of the body, including the head and the lower body. So what we saw in the last diagram is that there are actually two circulatory systems powered by our heart. On one side of the heart, the left side, blood is sent out to the body. On the other side of the heart, the right side, blood is sent out to the lungs. Blood flow to the body is referred to as systemic circulation, while blood flow to the lungs is referred to as pulmonary circulation. Blood is pressurized in the heart, and that causes it to move. And blood loses its pressure in the capillary beds. So once blood has gone to a capillary bed, it normally has to return to the heart to get repressurized. Blood also loses oxygen in the capillary bed, so systemic blood returning to the heart is typically shown as blue to denote that it has low oxygen, and while it's leaving the heart is shown as red to denote that it has high oxygen. And so we want to talk about how that happens. When blood returns to the heart from the body, it is repressurized on the right side of the heart, but it is also deoxygenized. So the first place that gets sent is to the lungs to get more oxygen. Blood is reoxygenated in the lungs and loses its CO2. And since it travels through a capillary network in the lungs, it loses its pressure as well. So now it has to be sent back to the left side of the heart from the lungs, and it is repressurized and sent to the body under high pressure. Blood vessels that carry blood away from the heart are referred to as arteries. Veins are blood vessels that carry blood to the heart. Generally speaking, arteries carry oxygenated blood and veins carry deoxygenated blood, but we will see that there are some exceptions. Now, arteries are muscular, and so why is that? Well, they have to be able to withstand the pressure that is created by the heart and then transmit that pressure produced by the heart to cause the flow of blood throughout the entire arterial side of the circulatory system. When pressurized blood flows into an artery, the artery expands and then contracts and forces the blood onward. It can only do this because arteries are heavily muscular, and you can see the muscular walls on an artery. And this is a diagram with much more detail than we need to know in this course. Veins have the same layers, but they're not nearly as muscular, and the muscles aren't nearly as important. And veins have valves, and we'll talk about why that is in a second. So veins, as I said, are blood vessels that return blood to the heart. They're not as muscular because blood that flows through them is at very low pressure, and therefore they don't have to withstand high pressure blood. They also have valves, and that's to prevent backflow of blood due to gravity. Once blood reaches a certain point in a vein, the veins will close if gravity is tending to pull it down. So blood will work its way up in a less continuous and more stepwise fashion. Now we want to talk about the capillary beds. After it leaves the heart, blood flows through ever smaller arteries until it reaches the capillary beds. The arteriole is the small vessel right here that serves the capillary beds, provides blood. It's the smallest vessel on the artery side. Each capillary in the capillary bed has a small sphincter muscle at its start point. And the sphincter is normally kept closed, meaning that blood doesn't flow through, but instead flows through the thoroughfare channels. When blood, meaning oxygen, is needed by the cells enveloped by this capillary network, the sphincters relax and now blood will flow through, and those cells will get their oxygen demand met. Otherwise, the blood will flow through the thoroughfare channels, and you will get some diffusion of oxygen here, and the low activity rate in these tissues will be maintained. Notice that blood is collected in the smallest veins called venules on the downstream side of the capillary network. And it's interesting to note that if all the capillaries opened simultaneously in the human body, there would not be enough blood to fill them. So the body depends on most of the beds being kept closed most of the time. I want to reiterate that cells are always close to a capillary, and that's shown here, and that the red blood cells flow single file through the capillaries, and this maximizes the exchange of oxygen with the tissues. Remember that materials flow either into or out of the blood by diffusion down their concentration gradients. So oxygen is in low concentration inside the cells, in high concentration inside the blood, so it flows towards the cells. The opposite is true for carbon dioxide. So that's it for today. I hope you understand the basic structure of the circulatory system. I hope you understand the difference between arteries and veins, why arteries are muscular, why veins have valves. I hope you understand that the heart consists of two pumps that pressurizes the blood. One of those pumps sends blood out to the whole body. The other pump sends it to the lungs. I hope you understand that exchange of materials occurs in the capillary beds, and every cell is close to a capillary in a capillary bed, and that the result of traveling through the capillaries is low pressurized blood, which means it has to return to the heart quickly to get repressurized, as well as reoxygenated. Okay, you have a lot to take in today. After that, go outside, look at nature, ask biological questions, bring them back to class, and I will see you soon.